Mark had always believed in hard work. He wasn't the kind of guy who cut corners, who left things unfinished, who walked away from responsibility. That's why he spent long hours at the office, making deals, closing sales, ensuring that he and Emily had the kind of future they had always dreamed of. The plan was solid: build their real estate investments, flip properties for massive profits, and eventually, retire early. That was the dream. That was what he thought they were working toward together. Coming home late wasn't unusual for him. Emily had always understood, or so he thought. He never imagined that his dedication to their future would become the very thing that allowed her to betray him. That night was different. Mark had flown in a day early from a business trip in Dallas, a last-minute change. He hadn't told Emily, he wanted to surprise her. The thought made him smile as he pulled into the driveway. He pictured her curled up on the couch with a glass of wine, waiting for him, maybe watching one of those reality shows she loved so much. He imagined her eyes lighting up with excitement when she saw him standing at the door, home earlier than expected. But as he stepped inside, the first thing he noticed was the jacket. It was expensive, Italian leather, dark brown, too large to be hers, and definitely not his. It lay draped over the back of the couch like it belonged there. A half-empty wine glass sat on the counter, the lipstick smudge along the rim stark against the crystal. Next to it, another glass, this one without any markings. His stomach tightened. A strange, unfamiliar cologne lingered in the air, sharp and invasive, drowning out the familiar scent of home. The faintest hint of it clung to the throw blanket on the couch, mixing with the subtle vanilla perfume Emily always wore. Something was off. Mark's breathing slowed. His senses sharpened. A lifetime of business instincts, of reading people, of anticipating negotiations and outcomes, kicked in. There was a new reality in front of him, one he hadn't accounted for. He could hear it now, low murmurs from down the hall. A deep voice, relaxed, comfortable. Then, a giggle. Soft. Familiar. Emily's. The sound sent a rush of ice through his veins. It was intimate in a way he hadn't heard in months, carefree, indulgent, secret. His mind raced, processing what his body already knew. The bedroom door wasn't fully closed. A sliver of golden light spilled into the dim hallway. Shadows shifted against the walls. The sheets rustled. A hushed whisper. A quiet moan. He didn't need to see it. He didn't need to walk into that room and confirm what was already painfully clear. The proof was all around him. The jacket. The cologne. The wine. The way she hadn't even bothered to be careful. She hadn't expected him home. Mark's fists clenched, his nails biting into his palms. 1,000 emotions crashed into him at once, rage, betrayal, humiliation, but he swallowed them down. Anger was impulsive. Anger made people act without thinking. And Mark was not the kind of man who acted without a plan. Most men would have stormed in, demanded answers, shouted accusations, thrown fists. But Emily wasn't worth that. Not anymore. Instead, Mark exhaled slowly and turned around. He stepped away from the door, away from the sound of his wife's laughter mixing with another man's voice. He didn't slam the front door. He didn't make a scene. He walked out, just as silently as he had entered. If Emily wanted to play dirty, she had no idea who she was up against. The morning after Mark found out, Emily was all tears and apologies. She didn't know how it happened. It wasn't serious. It was a moment of weakness, she said. Jason was just a friend, someone helping out with the staging on the last flip. He was going through a divorce, she added, as if that made sleeping with him any more excusable. Mark sat across from her at the kitchen table, stone-faced. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He just listened, nodding when she seemed to expect it. That confused her. She had expected fury. Or maybe heartbreak. But he didn't give her either. Instead, he gave her room to lie. And she filled it with more of them. He realized something in that moment. Emily didn't regret what she did, she regretted getting caught. And Jason? He was slick, charming in that overly polished, trust me, I'm a professional, kind of way. The guy had probably been circling for months, dropping compliments while Mark was out grinding 60-hour weeks. What hurt wasn't just the cheating, it was the cold realization that Emily had been planning a life beyond him. The stolen intimacy was just a symptom. The disease was her ambition. She wanted more than Mark, more than loyalty, more than partnership. She wanted Jason's promise of a shortcut to the top. But that same ambition made her blind. They still had 3 properties under renovation. 2 were small-town homes already in escrow. The third? A massive estate just outside city limits. It was their biggest project yet, Emily's idea originally, but Mark had been the one to talk investors into funding the early stages. The house was a monster, 6 bedrooms, 3 fireplaces, a sunroom, a guesthouse, and a view of the lake that made realtors practically salivate. The kind of property that, if flipped right, could net them 7 figures. It had been a point of contention early on, too expensive, too risky. But Emily had pushed for it hard. Now, Mark saw it for what it was, his chance. He approached Emily calmly over breakfast one weekend, suggesting they finish the estate and pour everything they had into it. Go big. A final flip before they scale back. He said all the right things. She lapped it up. Emily was ecstatic. She believed the act completely. She thought he was trying to fix their marriage. Trying to reconnect. She even began posting on social media again, those carefully curated photos of paint swatches and floor plans, pictures of her in hard hats next to Jason, captioned with phrases like, "Power team" and, "Big things coming." Jason didn't hide anymore, either. The 3 of them started showing up to open houses together. He played the doting advisor, offering design suggestions while Emily giggled at his every word. She didn't notice the way Mark's eyes followed everything. The new contractors they hired were mostly people Mark brought in, quiet professionals he knew through his business circles. Emily didn't question it. She was too distracted by the fantasy in her head, that once the house sold, she and Jason would have enough to start over. She'd leave Mark, maybe even play the victim to get sympathy. Tell people she and Mark had grown apart. That he was cold. That Jason saw her. Mark let her build the story. While she picked out tile colors and fretted over backsplash aesthetics, Mark was rewriting the business structure. Ownership papers were redrafted. LLCs restructured. New holding companies formed with addresses she didn't recognize. All assets, cash, property rights, profit shares, redirected quietly under his name. The thing about trust is, once someone breaks it, you see every blind spot you never knew you had. Emily never once asked to see the updated contracts. She assumed the money trail hadn't changed. She assumed Mark was too wounded to notice the shift in her affections. She assumed wrong. Behind the scenes, Mark cleaned house. The joint business accounts closed. New ones opened in his name. The estate staging budget cut slightly, just enough to make Emily complain, but not enough to seem suspicious. Everything Emily touched had his fingerprint behind it. The closer the estate got to completion, the more excited she became. She started mentioning moving to Florida. Talked vaguely about life after real estate. She even let slip, once, that Jason was looking at beachfront condos. She said it like a slip of the tongue, but her eyes sparkled like someone already gone. Mark just nodded. He had hired a private investigator, too. Not for leverage, he didn't need blackmail. He just wanted clarity. Confirmation. Bank statements, text transcripts, quiet photos of Emily and Jason together, mouths close in parked cars, hands on each other's backs in restaurants. He filed the evidence away like a bookkeeper stacking receipts. It wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about closure. By the time the estate was listed, the buzz was enormous. Multiple buyers circled. 2 offers over asking price came in within the first week. Mark chose the one with the fastest close. Emily was practically giddy. She was already calculating her share in her head, likely imagining how it would fund her new life. The day before closing, Mark stood in the finished estate, walking slowly through the polished hardwood hallways. Everything was flawless, perfect staging, perfect lighting, not a detail out of place. The life Emily thought she'd build with Jason was hanging in the air, just waiting to be claimed. But it wasn't hers. She had no idea that the life she thought she'd cheated her way into was about to slip through her fingers. And the best part? She would never even see it coming. The estate sold faster than anyone expected. 3 weeks after the first showing, the deal was closed. The buyer, a finance executive from out of state, had wired in a figure well above the asking price. Just like that, the biggest project Mark and Emily had ever tackled was finalized, and the payday was massive. The money hit the account Mark controlled quietly. The LLC, registered under a different name but owned entirely by him, now held the fruits of their supposed teamwork. Emily never noticed the change. She was too busy fantasizing about how she'd spend it. She thought she'd won. Emily began dropping hints, little breadcrumbs that wouldn't have meant anything to someone not paying attention. Mentions of moving out, of finding her own space for a while. She'd say things like she needed clarity, but Mark knew she meant Jason. She wasn't just preparing to leave. She was preparing to trade up. Mark watched it unfold with a calm precision. She started packing her things gradually. A pair of heels disappeared from the closet. Her favorite mug wasn't in the dishwasher anymore. Then came the bags tucked into the trunk of her car, small at first, then larger. She was doing it in stages, trying to act casual. And when she finally brought up the money, it was with forced innocence. She acted like she just wanted to talk business. Mark played along, wearing the same smile he'd worn through all of it. He reassured her that everything was being handled, that the payout was coming. That it was already set up in the trust. She believed him. It was almost funny, in a way. For months, she had been planning this escape. Building it in secret, fueling it with lies. She'd confided in Jason, shared her dreams of a new life, of starting over, only this time, on her terms. She told herself that Mark had become distant, too focused on work. That Jason made her feel seen. She'd convinced herself that cheating had a purpose. That it was the cost of chasing her own happiness. She hadn't realized that Mark was watching the whole time. The day she decided to leave, she got up early and dressed deliberately. Her makeup was done, her hair perfect. She kissed Mark on the cheek like everything was normal. Her suitcase was in the car. Jason was waiting. She just needed the wire to hit. She spent the morning checking her phone, refreshing her bank app, pacing through the kitchen like she was just restless. Mark had seen enough poker players to know what nerves looked like. Then came the moment. She asked about the money again, not quite able to hide the urgency in her voice. Mark led her into his office. On the desk, a stack of legal documents sat neatly arranged. Ownership records. Banking transfers. Trust filings. His name was on every line. Not a single asset was co-owned. Not a single dollar was coming her way. She skimmed the first few pages, her smile fading with every paragraph. Her confident posture collapsed into disbelief. She read faster, flipping pages, hands trembling. She checked the dates, the notary stamps, the official seals. It was airtight. She looked up at Mark, eyes wide with betrayal she had no right to feel. Her voice cracked as she started piecing together what had happened. But the math wasn't complicated. She owned nothing. All those hours she spent with Jason dreaming about freedom, gone. The condo in Miami she had bookmarked. The fantasy of cutting ties and living off the flip. The plan to blindside Mark and play the victim if things got messy. All of it evaporated. She'd backed the wrong man. For a while, she just stood there in stunned silence. The weight of it all sank in slowly, like a sinking ship just starting to feel the cold bite of water through the hull. She tried to argue. She reached for half-truths. She said they built this business together. That they flipped every house side by side. That she sacrificed, too. But Mark didn't flinch. Every time she spoke, he responded with paper. She had signed every document. Every change. Every amendment. She never read them. She was too busy thinking about her next move. She never imagined Mark could be capable of outmaneuvering her. But he was. She wanted to flip a house and a life. Instead, she flipped herself into a trap. At some point, she asked, quietly, maybe more to herself than to him, how he could do this to her. But Mark had already turned away. She walked out without another word. The suitcase she had packed so confidently that morning now looked ridiculous as she rolled it down the driveway, alone. Jason wasn't waiting anymore. The last text Mark saw pop up on her phone before she left was from an unknown number. A short message, "This is too messy. I'm out." Just like that, her plan unraveled. Mark sat down at his desk after she was gone. Outside, the wind rattled the leaves on the trees. The sun was beginning to dip. He picked up the documents, slowly stacking them together. The game was over. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't exposed her publicly. He hadn't even made a scene. He just let her walk herself into ruin. She cheated for a future she never got. And now, Mark had all of it. Emily's downfall wasn't loud. It was quiet. Awkward. Sad, even. After walking out of the house with her suitcase, what she once believed was her key to a new life, she drove straight to Jason's apartment. Her calls had gone unanswered since that morning, but she convinced herself he was just busy, or maybe surprised. She probably expected a warm embrace, some champagne, maybe a celebratory speech about how they were finally free. Instead, she arrived to a locked door, dark windows, and silence. His car wasn't in the lot. A neighbor said something vague about him moving out last night. It didn't take long for her to understand. Jason had seen the writing on the wall before she did. She tried texting. Calling. Begging. Each message went unread, her desperate apologies and frantic explanations bouncing off a man who had clearly used her for what she could offer, and now that offer was void. In the span of one day, Emily had lost everything. Her lover had vanished. Her money was a mirage. And her name wasn't on a single deed or document. She drove to her sister's house, sat in the driveway for over an hour, then left before knocking. Pride can be a stubborn thing, even when you have no room left for it. Meanwhile, Mark made his final move. The estate money had already been placed in a portfolio designed to grow slowly and safely, foundations, properties, and a series of investments that would stretch long into the future. But there was one gesture he'd planned weeks before the final sale. A significant portion, just over $200,000, was transferred to a series of men's shelters and legal aid nonprofits that specialized in helping men navigating divorce, custody battles, and betrayal. The kind of places that offered calm after chaos, for guys like him who never saw the hit coming. He never made a big announcement about it. No press release. No social media post. Just a quiet transfer and a note to the directors, "Help someone like me." It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about restoration. Mark moved back into the smaller house they bought years ago during their first flip, a modest but comfortable place with hardwood floors and a view of the park. He renovated the kitchen himself over the span of a month, built shelves in the garage, even took a few weeks off work to breathe. The silence felt earned. Then, one day, Emily came back. She didn't knock at first. She just stood there on the porch, makeup streaked, hair a mess, her body smaller somehow, like the weight of her choices had finally settled onto her shoulders. Her suitcase was in the trunk again. She had nowhere else to go. Her words were familiar. Apologies. Tears. Promises to change. All the clichés she once used to justify what she'd done. Her voice cracked as she spoke, her eyes searching for any flicker of softness in his face. She talked about their history, their home, the projects they'd built together. She said she'd made mistakes, but that love could heal things. That people could grow. She tried everything: guilt, nostalgia, desperation. Mark didn't speak for a while. He simply watched her, letting the silence stretch. He saw her now not as a partner, but as a stranger wearing a face he used to know. There was no venom in him. No lingering fury. Only clarity. She had gambled their future on a man who ran at the first sign of trouble. And now, she wanted to come back, not because of love, but because every other door had closed. Mark smiled softly. The kind of smile you give when something used to hurt, but doesn't anymore. Then he stepped back inside and closed the door behind him. He never looked back. Emily stood there for a long time before she finally turned and left. No tears from him. No victory dance. No final words. Just quiet peace. And in that peace, Mark found something far greater than revenge: freedom. It was a cool morning in early spring when Mark stood in front of his new home, coffee in hand, the soft hum of traffic somewhere in the distance. The house wasn't extravagant, but it was everything he wanted: clean lines, wide windows, and the kind of quiet that wrapped around you like a familiar jacket. He had bought it outright, no mortgages, no partners, no strings. Just his name on the title and the deed. There were no memories in the walls, no echoes of betrayal. The air inside was light. The silence wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. And peace, he'd come to realize, was the real prize. The months after Emily's departure had been quieter than he expected. No court battles. No drawn-out drama. Just the occasional piece of gossip drifting through old mutual contacts. Emily hadn't landed on her feet. She had tried, that much was clear. For a while, she bounced from couch to couch, old friends offering sympathy until the novelty wore off and the truth caught up. No one wanted to be her savior when they realized she'd built her castle out of sand. She even tried to rebuild bridges. A few posts on social media hinting at growth, reflection, change. But the likes came slower, the followers fewer. Eventually, her pages went dark. Last Mark heard, she was back in her hometown, sleeping on a futon in a basement apartment she shared with a college acquaintance she hadn't spoken to in years. The life she envisioned, the one with Jason, the beaches, the reinvention, had evaporated. Jason, true to form, had vanished not long after their failed getaway. He'd resurfaced in another state, working for a different brokerage, already sniffing around another married client. Patterns, it seemed, didn't change. But Mark had. He didn't just recover, he thrived. With the profits from the estate and a clear mind, he refocused his energy on building something real. He expanded quietly, buying undervalued properties, investing in neighborhoods other developers ignored. He treated each project like a lesson. No shortcuts. No partners who smiled too wide. Just vision and execution. The business grew fast. His name started appearing in small write-ups, investor circles, even the occasional podcast interview. People were curious how he built so quickly. He never told them the whole story. Some things were better left as fuel. He hired a few good people, steady, loyal, sharp. No one flashy. No one chasing headlines. His team became a tight unit, focused on the work, not the drama. And every time he signed off on a deal, every time he walked through a finished property, he felt it. That deep, steady sense of winning, not the loud, chest-pounding kind, but the quiet, unshakable kind that only comes from getting back up when someone tried to break you. One afternoon, while reviewing the paperwork for a commercial lot near the river, he found himself chuckling. Not at anything in particular, just a passing thought. A memory. Emily had always called the house flips their future. She said each one was a stepping stone to something bigger. She saw real estate as a shortcut, a stage, a way to perform success. But she hadn't realized what it took to actually build something lasting. She thought flipping homes was about surface, paint, furniture, charm. Mark knew it was about foundation, structure, integrity. And in the end, she got flipped. The irony wasn't lost on him. He poured the last of his coffee, signed the closing documents for the latest acquisition, and stepped out onto the porch of his office. The city skyline blinked in the distance. Deals were waiting. Behind him, in folders and files and deeds, was everything Emily once thought she'd take with her. Ahead of him, a life she never imagined. One he had built brick by brick, truth by truth. She'd thrown it all away for a man who ran. He'd kept building. And now he owned it all.